Now, Rendlesham has been addressed as Britain's Roswell, and of course was one of the most famous of all the UFO incidents here in the UK. Allegedly in 1980, around Christmas, over 3 to 4 nights, a number of sightings were seen by American Air Force personnel based at RAF Bentwaters, which was alleged to conceal nuclear weapons. Now, the story that went round just a little while afterwards was whilst all the protests were going on at Greenham Common about the nuclear deterrent that was there, it was in fact not stationed there at all, and that was a red herring, and the nuclear missiles concerned were actually stored up here at RAF Bentwaters. Now, allegedly, and the story, I say allegedly because there has been so many different versions of this, was a UFO landing in a field just outside the forest between Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge, and many personnel did witness this, both civilian and military. But there's also been calls for the fact that it was just a lighthouse, which had been dispelled by the military personnel that were there. There was also one theory about it being a truckload of horse manure. Now, I don't know whether that was a real truckload of horse manure or someone just saying it was a load of old shit. I don't know. But we can get away with that on the internet anyway. But we're going to spend the next hour, or at least 55 minutes, talking to Sacha Christie, who's with me on the phone now. Sacha, good evening.
Hello, Ross.
Let's first off give the listeners a little bit of a background view to Rendlesham.
Basically, there was a 3-day event on an American Air Force base, a nuclear Air Force base in Britain, in a rural area in Suffolk. And over the 3 nights, there were a series of UFOs seen, crafts in the forest, and the light seen coming in and out of the forest. On the 3rd night, there was a whole hell of a hullabaloo with things going on all over the place, really, I suppose. We've got one landed UFO in a field. We've got something else going off in the forest with Charles Holt and John Burroughs. The first night, John Burroughs and Jim Penniston saw this pyramidal object in the forest that was covered in what looked like molten metal and probably, the electromagnetic radiation emitting from it. And it had a series of symbols on the side. Jim actually, either very stupidly or bravely, went up and touched this craft, although he admitted that in his original statement, and said that he got within 50 yards of it. But in a later testimony, he's saying, which I absolutely do believe, that he went up to the craft, he drew the symbols. You can see by the drawings he was absolutely, crapping his pants because his hands were shaking so much, and you can see that in the drawings. So he's touched this thing. It's felt like glass, and the symbols have felt like etched glass, and he's drawn these in his notebook. And there's been some suggestions since then of some missing time. They've gone missing for 4 hours, etc. But based on the actual documentation, there's no talk of that whatsoever. So I think a lot of this has come out through hypnosis.
Now let's look.
I actually find that if you know about hypnosis, it's not inexact science; it's a very exact science. The brain will only tell you what is in there, whether it's been placed in there or seen. It doesn't matter. But when it comes to sort of mind control and all these memory overwrites, there can be 3 or 4 or 5 layers of different, slightly different memories over the top of the actual memory. So one session is not going to pull out all the information. You need to go deeper, which,
Now, let's look at Larry Warren's statement first off, because Larry has always said there was something more to this than the other guys said. He wrote a book called East at Left Field, I think it was, or Left at East Field.
No, it's Left at Eastgate. It's Left at Eastgate. He wrote
that's the one. I was close.
It's an absolutely incredible account of what happened. The recall of that man is stunning. Everything, every detail. He remembers so much, not just from that night, but, the entire episode that he was there. His memory is amazing.
Now, it's interesting to say that because there are other, allegedly, people saying that some of the other accounts of the other servicemen that were there, their accounts have changed over the years. And
yes,
I say
most certainly.
Yeah, and I say this allegedly because obviously we're on air and I don't want to get us sued. But at the same time, there has been accusations that the others have done quite well out of books and such like.
I don't think so. I don't think anybody's made any money out of this. I don't think anybody ever makes any money out of this field. I really don't believe that even up to date, they might have made a little bit of cash, but it's not going to be anything of any significance.
No, what I was going to go on to say was that even if they had, this is something that's affected their lives to the point where they've now dedicated their lives specifically to what happened in 1980. So whether or not it's been exaggerated, whether the story's been changed, something happened that affected these guys' lives, didn't it?
Absolutely, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. And if they do make any money, fair play to them.
Larry came down and did my conference, the Now That's Weird conference in Glastonbury a few years ago. We talked to Larry at length, and I've known Larry for some time through conferences in America. We've met up and we've gone drinking together, and I've heard Larry's story. And Larry has always said all the way along that there was more to this than meets the eye. There was something underneath. There's something that they all should have remembered but didn't, or that they remembered but couldn't say. There was various different things. Now, your theory that you've released quite recently on the internet seems to fall in line with this, doesn't it? So start, if you may, by explaining what that theory is and how that relates to the Rendlesham incident.
Well, I've been researching mind control techniques and, hypnosis and all these kind of things to see what could have happened to these men afterwards to make them all remember something so completely different. It's obvious. I mean, it's not even obvious. It's fact that they all had hypnosis and were given drugs to see if they were telling the truth. But I actually think that they've been lied to on that account. Larry even presented some evidence recently that they weren't given sodium pentothal, it was amytal, which is, one that you would use to distort memory and, not have somebody tell you the truth. I've been looking through all these documents online and some in very obscure places. I don't just pick something up and run with it, like people have accused me of. I was actually researching something else when I came across this document about behavioural sciences and physical security on nuclear bases. So I thought, this is interesting. So I had a little look through it, and this was the 5th, I do believe. I've lost track now. I've got 10 of them. 9. And I was looking through, and it was just right at the very beginning when they were talking about the this particular kind of radar that they wanted to use, which is a kind of like fencing system, and also not only was it an intruder detector, it was also a psychological deterrent, which was giving people these senses of paranormal and strange feelings, dread, fear, but what I was reading, what this device actually did, it was like reading Larry's description of when he got out of the Jeep and was walking through the woods with Adrian and all the other guys up to the edge of the field of Capel Green, when he had all these terrible senses of dread, and he felt this and that. His description was the only thing that made me stop and think, oh my God, that sounds exactly like that. So I got this book, left at Eastgate, and I'm looking through it, and I'm reading it, and I'm looking back at the document. And then I'm going over the rest. I started reading the book again because obviously with this in mind, it's a completely different book. And I'm looking through it, and there's all this paranormal stuff that they've been given, all the fear of ghosts at the end of this flight line, druids at the end of that flight line, this girl on the bicycle, faceless entity cycling around the entire area, scaring young GIs. Don't go into these villages, it's full of witches and they don't like airmen, and all this kind of rubbish. And I'm like, well, this just seems like a setup. The one thing that struck me so badly was the druids at the end of the flight line that they were told to leave alone. Why would you tell hooded figures to, spook in the end of a flight line, just to ignore them? There could be anybody, and even if they were genuinely at one point druids, they could have been compromised at any point in time by anyone. Any terrorist cell you care to mention, never mind the Russians, because this was at the height of the Cold War. The height of the Cold War, you do not tell security personnel to ignore people spooking the end of a flight line on a nuclear base.
Absolutely
not.
None
of it made any sense.
It'd be just the opposite, I would have thought.
Where they take Larry and Adrian up to this craft that's landed in the field or crashed, whichever, and everyone's just calm and they're all in position and they're doing this and the other. Walk up to this, they took Adrian and Larry and walked them up to this craft, asked them to walk 10 paces to the left, 10 paces to the right, back to their original positions, and as they walk away, somebody pats Larry on the back, like, good man. Why would you even do that if it was a crashed UFO? Why would you have anybody at all from that base there? You would have the specialist teams for this, So none of it made any sense to me.
I can understand that totally.
Further into the documents, and I found all the others, not just this one, because this was a 10-year research project. It wasn't something that they just had one meeting about. These papers from this document were the results of research projects already conducted, and these were the conclusions. And then there were tenders to further research projects for the next symposium meetings that were all, sent to these 140-odd personnel that were all either contractors to the defence agencies of whichever department, or people who already were within the Defence Nuclear Agency.
Mm. Now, the Nuclear Defence Agency, you spoke about these on TV last week with Miles, the Nuclear Defence Agency being the agency behind this particular test.
That was the Department of Nuclear Affairs, Naval Affairs, sorry.
Right.
Department of Naval Affairs, the ones that actually instigated this.
Right.
And I've been reading through all the rest of them, and the second document is just stating the fact that we didn't know who was working within any of the bases. There were so many people that had just been, walked out of service and had an absolutely intimate knowledge of the layout of the bases, and the security problems were just absolutely massive, and they needed to rejiggle every single aspect of it. Without anybody being out of the picture. There was, right the way to the top, nobody was excluded, no matter what rank, position, or anything.
Now, what interested me in particular last week, when you were talking on the television programme with Miles, was about this plasma that was affected by the fence. And please explain for my listeners exactly what you meant by that and how they actually use this together with holographic equipment.
Well, I haven't really gone into the holography bit of it because it's just too much. There's just so much there. I have had a little look in it, and then what they wanted to do was use it as an on-board ship deterrent, this holography. They did talk about using it, and they were talking about having a field test. The plasma aspect of it was the way that the light broke up that Charles Holt saw. That is classic. It's like fireball, plasma ball. Anybody can find this out on the internet. I am quite sure that there's thousands of videos on YouTube. This technology is not difficult, and it's not particularly dangerous in a wooded area either, as other people have suggested there would be forest fires, because essentially it's just electricity. It's not actually fire, and when lightning strikes the tree doesn't necessarily explode into fire, It's that kind of thing. These ions are negative, and they discharge on any surface. To be contained, they need to be contained in black cobalt glass, Now, I don't know what it was that Larry saw. I don't know if it was one of these things, because one of these crafts they were talking about, well, they're not crafts, they are called portals, and they are stage posts in the fencing system they're connected by electromagnetic radiation emitted through a leaky coaxial cable, specifically leaky coaxial cable, to emit this field, which gives people a sense of unease. It's well known in paranormal investigations. One of the first things you rule out is, are there any leaky cables anywhere? Is this why people are getting this strange sense of something being there or something foreboding? The other aspect of it was extremely low frequencies, which, can make you feel ill, make you throw up, or also this waveguide horn that there was part of the system could also transmit voices, and, you have the subliminal thing in shops now where underlying everything it's saying, do not steal, you'll go to jail, blah, 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 that kind of thing. So it could be transmitting pretty much anything. The lasers were, obviously, when the light's broken, the alarm goes off because that's, a perimeter fence intrusion. And that was the three basic components of it. Now, Larry said that this object in the field was so bright that he couldn't look at it directly. It was making his eyes hurt and his eyes water, but he did say that it was the most amazing rainbow explosion, like shards of rainbow colour. Now, I would never have been able to explain that at all if I hadn't been watching a DVD of this science symposium, and this woman was talking about the kind of the fact that we've got sort of a highly charged atmosphere these days, and it's causing all kinds of strange effects and weather phenomena, etc. And she described, and she showed this S-22 that was Miramar Air Force show, air show in San Diego, and as it choked on its afterburners or whatever to set off, I'm not quite sure what what it did. this guy was taking photographs of it, and it actually showed you the plasma in the air discharging on the surface of this F-22. And it was just the most incredible explosion of rainbow colours. And I thought, well, that's plasma discharging in the air. Larry's describing a massive rainbow explosion, shards of rainbow. And I'm thinking, well, that's obviously plasma. Whether it's ET technology or not, it doesn't really matter. It's the same technology. So... Now, and he's seen three beings coming out of the craft, or coming from behind it, not actually out of it.
Yeah.
And and he said they look really real. He kind of swings it to the two because he saw it with his own eyes, and he's like, no, they were really there. And also, he says that it didn't feel the same as any other experience that he's actually had, which he has had in the past. Even from childhood, he says that in his book.
Now, Sacha, let me just ask you a question at this point, because a lot of my listeners are going to say, well, obviously, you're a skeptic and that you're going to say this, blah, 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 blah. But you're not.
To a certain degree, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, you're what I would call an on-the-fence rational. You're like myself. You investigate things and you look for the rational and logical explanations first. But you yourself have actually had UFO experiences, so you're far from being a skeptic, aren't you?
Absolutely. I actually really, really was desperate to prove that this was an ET event, because then it would give me, even just for myself in my own heart, a sense of validation. I will never have any closure. I will never have any answers. I will never have thousands of people looking at what happened to me and my friends, like we have with the Rendlesham case. So I started on this journey. It was for me to find some answers, to get some closure, to find a sense of safety and security in life, or just a sense of what is, because I don't have any anymore.
No. Well, that's the sort of effect this has on you.
And what continues to happen,
Well, one of the other things as well that I'd like to talk to you about, and we've got to go into a break in a minute, but just before we do, is about Larry's account of the film that was made of this, because he said this was filmed on at the time of the event, and he said, I think it was the second or the third night, the film went into a tin and was put on a plane and sent to Germany. Now, he's maintained that story ever since I've known him, that there was a film that went to Germany and then probably on from Germany to America that must still be in archive somewhere. Probably nobody will ever get to see it, even with freedom of information and such like. But he said...
I would be surprised if it even exists anymore.
Well, it may well have been destroyed, although I think that somewhere someone's probably still got that hidden in archive. But, one way or the other, there seems to be something that would prove this incident one way or the other on that tape.
There were photographs taken, there were films taken. Everybody was in position. This is what's not right about that. Everyone was in position. And I've got a document that is at it's the Air Force, US Air Force protocol for UFO incidents at home and overseas. And I've read through it. And at one point in time, I said to Larry, you'll be able to recognise all these people. I bet this is who they are. Well, I'm not so sure anymore.
No.
Unless they actually were involved, because it was to trigger all other agencies that would be involved in such an incident. So... the only fear they had was people being able to FOI about the fire service, and that was the Achilles heel. The thing that brought the whole thing down was the Holt memo.
It does seem to me that there was a psychological element to this, of possibly training the military as to what to do in a situation. And also the timing was somewhat strange, wasn't it? Because this was during the Christmas period, whilst most of the personnel were actually in bars, in the club, checking out the usual sort of thing that they would do that time of the year.
Well, that's not strictly true. I mean, the idea is that at Christmas everybody's a little bit more lax about security, but that's not true, because people think that they're actually a little bit more on the ball, so to speak. But the psychological aspect is absolutely true, because there's so many problems within the physical security and the personnel, and it wasn't the fault of the personnel, I've got to say. It was the way that the agencies were set up. It was nothing to do with the poor staffing, although some of it was very poor. And I think that, Bentwaters was quite a sadly neglected base. It was very miserable. There was a lot of problems on there. And I think maybe the fact that it was legendary for UFO sightings, dates in way, way back, that is one of the reasons that they actually chose that, that kind of cover story. But it was not just so much as... they wanted to test the vulnerabilities. They wanted to see how easily it would be to penetrate the base and actually remove some of the weapons. I've pulled up a page here I'd like to read out if you don't mind. It won't take too long. This is in the second symposium notes. It says a single nuclear security agency, an NSA, should be mandated at the highest levels of government under appropriate congressional controls. This new agency should be unequivocal, broad across all agency and departmental channels, authority to command rather than negotiate, correction of vulnerabilities, and a charter to gather all available data on aspects of security so that the database requisite for meaningful research is available to researchers from a single source. In other words, let's consider going back to the old Atomic Energy Commission concept. Then it goes on to say, I express the opinion as a member of the original bad guy, good guy team, and this is stated by Donald Darling, that if the specially selected 3 special forces troops, the government, civilian and the independent security consultants had been granted carte blanche and not forbidden overt or covert team action, the debriefing of the commander of a storage site and his staff could well be conducted with a supposedly protected material lying on the conference room table. Pursuant to one possible scenario, the first facility assigned for penetration survey, which is a constant, intruder alarms with nothing being there, and to see how long it will be before the security staff would just stop checking and, keep just switching off the alarm system rather than going out and having a look. Where are we? If pursuant to one possible scenario, the first facility assigned for the penetration survey would have been reduced to a pile of rubble with heavy, if not total, casualties to the defenders and adjoining military base. The nuclear storage area would have been left in such a condition that it would be highly unlikely that anyone would be able to determine the number of weapons extracted by the invaders, even if the authorities could have entered the area after an attack. It is suggested that all facilities and installations which contain nuclear weapons or fuels be subjected to a continuing program of penetration testing by teams composed of military and civilian black and white hats, and that such facilities be monitored by operations research personnel. There is nothing like a walk in the middle of the night through the woods and over a fence to begin your day, and nothing more refreshing than lying in a snowdrift for a few hours, finding out where the cookies are stored and how the security systems work so that there is no misunderstanding. Let it be clearly understood that every single facility surveyed are exceeded existing security requirements, right down to the man with the M16 and the fence line imposed by all levels of command. The humans are right on. The government's own security policies and requirements are wrong. In spite of all corrective action since that time, it is strongly suspected that we still have a long way to go, but we can say with any degree of certainty that our government and our military or defence contractors and facilities can be successfully defended against even a small overt or covert guerrilla or dissident type of operation. That was right at the very beginning of all of these, and we're talking a few years on before we get to the technology that I've been describing that I think was present, at the very least, the Larry's night, which was the one that triggered my, because it was so similar what was being described in the document. So there you have it. They didn't know what the left hand was, or the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing.
Now, when this story broke, Sacha, there was a conference planned in Woodbridge. Now, I know that it's been resurrected again now, but it all went haywire for a while, didn't it? Because this story broke. Tell us exactly what went on.
Well, I don't think it was anything to do with what I've been saying, really. The fact of the matter is that John and Jim spoke at the last one and really didn't give much away. They were going to speak at this one and still not give all the details. People didn't really want to pay out the money, for no information. And in the end, they were on a radio show and they cancelled the whole thing without even telling the organiser. As if it was an event just for them. There was Travis Walton was speaking, Bob Salas, Larry Warren, Peter Robbins. There were 9 speakers over an entire weekend. So because of that, there's been, it was all cancelled. It just went off. It just went terribly wrong. It really upset Gordy, and he's such a good man. All these people, they're really good people, and they worked hard on this, and they've been doing it for a good few years now to get it on the map, and they just come along like a wrecking ball. Now, what these people have done is frantically put together another amazing conference in less than 9 weeks, never mind 9 months, where there's going to be Timothy Good, Bob Salas, Larry Warren, Peter Robbins. It's just an amazing set of speakers. So the conference is on the 17th of June, and the tickets, I think, are £20, and it's well worth it. I mean, the hats off to those guys for really, really pulling this out of that, you know, Wooders
Yeah,
art.
absolutely. Is there a website that people can go to buy tickets for that?
Yeah, RendleshamUFO.com, www.rendleshamufo.com.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now let's come back to, we were talking about your own personal experiences in the first half and the reasons why you're not a skeptic, because you've actually had your own situation over the years that has led you to believe there's something in the whole UFO thing. And
Absolutely.
perhaps now is a good time to sort of touch on that and explain to people about some of your own experiences and why you believe that there must be something out there other than just this other technology.
Well, the first UFO I saw was when I was 12, and it was just a tiny thing zipping about crazily in the sky when I was with my mum. The next thing that I'd ever seen was I'd gone to Wales with my boyfriend at the time, my son. We went with his sister and her son and their uncle. And we'd been there one night, and the next night we'd been about during the day, you know, gone for walks and stuff like that. And my Stevie called me outside when I was upstairs. I come running out and to have a look at what it was, you know, because it sounded urgent. And he pointed off in the distance, and miles away, there was a tiny flickering in the clouds, which I first assumed to be lightning. And he said, "No, keep watching it." And it kept coming on, just a little flicker and then a flicker, a bit further on, and it was moving off to our right. And I was like, "Oh, wow, yeah, brilliant." And then it stopped. And then it zigzagged towards us really slowly, just flickering in the clouds. And then eventually it was just above us, but in front of us, over a field in front of the house. I mean, we were in the middle of nowhere, nothing around for miles. There was a pub and a shop and a few houses. It was literally a very tiny village. And then something, a strobe light went off behind us, and we looked round, and I was like, "Oh, look, there's another one." And then there was this sphere, which was about, I don't know, about 10 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet in height. Can't have been any more than that. And it was just pulsing this grey-white light on and off every other second, and surrounded by mist, you know. And this other one in the sky, it was just an incredible, it was a disc. It must have been about 50, 60 feet across. Obviously hard to determine, you know. It was hiding in the clouds as well, but only just. You could see it had a central circle of white light, and it had lines of light coming out from the centre to the outer edges, and at the outer edges it had another fine light, which was, all the lights were rotating. The lines of light were rotating one way, and the outer edge light was rotating the other way. And the central light was just bright white, bluey white light, incredible brightness. It just lit up everywhere. You know, and my son said that something had touched his foot, a hand had come through the hedge and touched his foot, and this did not impact us whatsoever. We were behaving so irrationally. You would think that you would be in a car, gone, on the phone to someone, whatever. We were not like that. So, you know, we took the kids inside because they were scared, and John and Danya started watching TV, and Steve started doing the dishes, and I was looking, the kids started playing, and just like nothing had happened. And I just couldn't believe it, and I just this, I'm off back outside. I don't even know what possessed me. And I went and stood right underneath it. And then I heard something running up behind me. And I'll tell you something, whatever it was fast, and it had two legs. I know that sound has been drumming in my head for 14 years, you know. And I have no idea what it was, but it bumped into my back, and I was gone. I was running. It was like being hit by a truck. Everything just boom, back on. I was there. Hello? Oh, my God, what is going on? You know, I was just running, and I didn't even know I was running until I was running, and I couldn't see. I was so scared. I'd gone blind, you know, and I just thought I'd done kind of 3 bionic woman leaps into the house, and obviously I hadn't, because the garden was quite a length, and I was just a gibbering wreck, you know. I couldn't even go to the toilet. I wouldn't even put my feet on the floor. Once I got on the bed, I didn't even dare put my feet on the floor. I made Steve go around the entire house, close the curtains, lock the doors, you know, barricade us in, sort of thing. But then we were all asleep not long after, and we've got no recollection of anything after a certain point in the night. You know, and we've all been so deeply traumatised since then, every single one of us. It took us 13 years, and we got back together and found each other through Facebook. And I found out that John, who was with us, he ended his own life because it just drove him. It just drove him mad. We just, you know, it driven me mad. It's Daniel's struggles, Steve's struggles. It's left us all feeling so exposed and small, and you know, no security, no sense of security or what is anymore. You know, and
no, a lot of people have said that.
This is why I just was so driven, because it's this anger and frustration in me that I have no answers, I have no closure, and what happens to us, what happened, is just still happening. It doesn't happen all the time, you know, but we have events and we don't know what it is, you know, and it's frightening, and it leaves you feeling so helpless. The only thing that I can do is this.
Do you think that do you think sometimes that scientists and skeptics write things off far too quickly? They're just so quick to actually say, oh, well, it's a lighthouse, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, and that's the end of it. Because let's face it, in a universe this size, and universes beyond our own that we haven't even found yet, surely we can't be the only intelligent beings.
Of course not. And are we intelligent, really?
Well, there's some debate over that, isn't there? You've only got to look at Syria and Iran.
We are.
You've only got to look at what's happening.
Intelligent.
I was going to say, you've only got to look at what's happening out in Syria and Iran at the moment. The Western world is supposed to be the wise end of the world, and you look around you and you think,
entirely, yeah,
what hope is there for us? But no, I totally understand what you're saying. But if we can just go back to Rendlesham for a moment, because what I want to do now is just take this from the other side of the fence, if you like, because a few years ago, back in, I think it was 2004, I went to Rendlesham with a group of investigators myself. Now, at the time, I was into the paranormal. I was searching about ghosts and orbs and this sort of thing. And you know when you have these, you know when you have these experiences where everywhere you go, somebody says, "Oh, have you ever been to so and so?" And everyone I bumped into for 2 to 3 weeks kept saying, "Have you ever been to Rendlesham Forest?" And I kept saying to them, "No, because I'm not into the whole UFO thing," which I wasn't at the time. So I had no interest in Rendlesham whatsoever. But anyway, it was as if someone was saying, you know, you've got to go to this place. And the final straw came when I was sitting at home one day, and two of my team from the Phantom of Fraud project from Ghost Detectives had teams all over the UK, and two of my team members turned up from Norfolk and knocked on my door, said they'd driven all the way down from Norwich to Bedfordshire, where I lived, which was about a 3-hour drive, just to tell me about an experience they'd had the night before in Rendlesham Forest. And I thought, oh, this is it's just too much. And it turned out that there was a message for me from an entity, and that's how they described it, that wanted to meet me in Rendlesham Forest. So I thought, okay, I've got to go. So the following day, we'd taken a team up. We'd got things together at fairly short notice, and off we went to Rendlesham Forest. It was a very dark, very cold winter's night. And all the team were very, very keen after an hour or two out to go back to the car, have some soup and some coffee and various other things that we'd got in the boot. And we were walking back down track 10 at Rendlesham, which I'm sure you know, and about 50 yards from the end of track 10, bearing in mind that I was still very sceptical and rational at the time, I stopped dead and said, I'm going to channel something. And they all looked at me as if I was balmy. And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm going to channel something. And I started going on about whiskers tickling my ear and this cat-like creature that was standing above my left-hand shoulder. And then all of a sudden, others in my party could see it. And this started to freak me a little bit because I was having problems translating what it was trying to tell me. But there's a full transcript for this and the most amazing picture you have ever seen, which I never send out.
Tell me about this picture, yeah.
I only ever send this out, I show this rather at conferences. I never send it out. But this picture is probably the clearest picture of an entity that I've ever seen. And in all the conferences all over the world that I've shown this, nobody has ever been able to give me a rational or logical explanation. The strange thing was, I described this thing 15 minutes or so earlier. The photographer from the team had taken it back to his car, plugged it into the laptop, and there it was. There was no chance for any digital manipulation. It was there. And to this day, Sacha, I have never been able to explain this other than it could have been some kind of interdimensional entity, which leads me to the point of why I'm telling you this, because I believe that there's some kind of vortex or portal at Rendlesham where things do occasionally come through and have been coming through on a fairly regular and semi-regular basis, which is why I still believe that there could be a mixture of both. I like what you're saying with regards to your theory with the plasma, with the fence, with the anti-coax or the leaking coax cable, but I also feel that there could be something more to it as well. So it's like a mixture of the two.
I would absolutely concur with that, Ross, because I've been there a good few times myself, and I have had a few Scooby-Doo moments. I'm telling you, I mean, the photograph that Ian took, my ex, of Jean and I think we were on track 10, ironically, and there's two Jeans, but one of them's a larger male version. I'm sure you remember the photograph.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it, haven't you?
I think I have, yeah.
Yeah, and I've had a few reasonable explanations for it, actually, but nobody else has taken any photographs. And one of the most kind of the reason I could actually go with would be that there were two flashes going off at the same time, but that wasn't the case. So, you know, it's quite a strange photograph, but all of my photographs, not all of them, but a majority of the photographs that I've taken there over the years have all been so bizarre. Even Brenda's, I mean, all these light striations and, you know, what are they?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was one of the things that intrigued me in the first place. When people were saying about Rendlesham and the UFO, it didn't really interest me greatly because that wasn't my field of expertise at the time. But then they started to show me pictures of orbs, and I'd only seen orbs indoors. I hadn't seen them outdoors. Then I started to get into the theory that maybe there were moisture and damp in the air, so we were doing a whole series of experiments on that.
Well, you get them in one photograph and then not in the next.
Exactly.
You know, and why would that be if there was moisture in the air? Surely that would be a consistent effect.
Well, exactly. And again, one of my investigations that I did some years ago in Boscastle in Cornwall, a voice said quite clearly to me, take two pictures of the stall in front of you. Now you see me, now you don't. And I got a skeptic right next to me, and I said to the skeptic exactly what I'd just heard in my ear, and I took the two photographs as I was explaining this to the skeptic. And in the first picture, there's the most magnificent blue orb you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And in the next photo, everything is exactly the same, but no orb. And you have to say those things go way, way beyond coincidence.
No, well, you see, I've done experiments. I've done it with my friends who are sceptical, and I've done it in one of my friend's houses. I think she's moved out. But I was saying, you know, right, I'm going to take a photograph of the fireplace. If you want to be in the picture, please appear.
Yeah.
And I'd take a photograph, and I'll take a series, and in one of them, there's an orb in front of the fireplace. There's one on the floor that is bright red, and then the next thing you know, this bright red orb is in the next picture, and this other orb has moved. So can't be dust particles, and you know, because it would be if it would have had a reflective side, it would have moved and probably wouldn't be reflective in the second picture. You know, all of these theories that people come out with, yes, it might be the case for some, but I definitely don't believe for all.
No, absolutely.
Especially not when you ask them to appear and they do, or they're telling you that they're going to and they're there.
Exactly,
you know?
Yeah. Now, I've had many, many cases where skeptics have said to me, oh, you know, have you thought of depth of field and have you thought of moisture and dust? And you think, well, you know, what do you take me for? You know, I'm an investigator. You know, the clue's in the title, you know.
You know? I've even thought of this and this, actually, did you?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I don't know. But anyway, Sacha, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us this evening. It's been an absolute delight chatting to you.
We got her today.
Yes, absolutely right. And I'm sure we will do TV together at some point in the future.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Sacha, thanks for taking the time to chat.
Well, thanks very much for having me on, Ross.
No problem.
Speak to you soon.
Yeah, speak to you soon. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. There you go. That was Sacha Christie. Now, Sacha, as I